It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us.
A Tale of Two Cities is a historical novel written in 1859 by Charles Dickens. This novel deals with the major themes of duality, revolution, and resurrection in London and Paris, as economic and political unrest led to the American and French revolutions. Set in London and Paris before and during the French Revolution, A Tale of Two Cities was written in the third-person point of view, which allows a panoramic perspective on events. The principal characters are Alexandre Manet, Lucy Manet, Charles Darnay, Sidney Carton, Jarvis Lorry, Ernest Defoe, and Madame Defoe. Now let's see some more detailed information about the characters.
Hello, I'm Ronald. Let's talk a little bit about the characters in the story. First, we have Alexandre Manet, a French doctor who was secretly in prison in the Bastille prison for 18 years and suffers some mental trauma from the experience. After being released, he is nursed back to health by his daughter Lucy in England. During the revolution, he tries to save his son-in-law, Charles Darnay, from the guillotine. Now we have Lucy Manet, later Darnay, a beautiful young woman recognized for her kindness and compassion. After being reunited with her father, she cares for him and remains devoted to him even after her marriage to Charles Darnay. Charles Darnay, a French aristocrat, Darnay renounces his family name of Saint Evremond and moves to England, where he works as a tutor and eventually marries Lucy Manet. He is put on a trial during the revolution for the crimes of his family. Sidney Carton, a lawyer who looks like Charles Darnay and who lives in a fog of apathy and alcohol. His love for Lucy Manet motivates him to sacrifice his life to save the life of her husband. Mr. Jarvis Lorry, an English banker, a loyal friend to the Manet family. Mr. Lorry shepherds the family out of Paris after the doctor's release from prison and during the revolution. Ernest Defarge, the owner of a wine shop in Paris suburbs. Defarge is a leader of the Jacquard, a robbing band of peasants during the French Revolution. Madame Therese Defarge, a hard, vengeful woman who is married to Ernest Defarge. Madame Defarge knights a registry with the names of aristocrat She condemns and later leads the female revolutionaries in killing and exacting revenge on her enemies. Now we have a little analysis about women as the central characters in the story. The characters around whom the action revolves in both London and Paris are women, Lucy Monet and Madame de Farc. Additionally, Dickens uses women through the book to represent the moral climate of a group or family. Although Dickens may not develop his female characters as fully as he does some of the male characters in A Tale of Two Cities. Nevertheless, the women provide the men in the novel with an emotional foundation that causes the men to act for or react against what the women represent. Lucy and Madame de Farc, for instance, drive the action in their respective spheres of influence as the golden thread that binds the life of Dr. Alexandre Manette, Mr. Lorry, Darnay, and Carton together. Lucy is a passive character who influences others through who she is rather than what she does. The comfortable home she creates comforts the men in her life, and her devout compassion for others inspires them. Her goodness enables them to become more than they are and to find the strength to escape the prison of their lives. On the other hand, Madame de Farc stands at the center of the revolutionary activity in Paris as an active agent of change. Even when she is just sitting in the wine shop and igniting her death register, Madame de Farc instigates hatred and violence, exemplified by her leadership in the mob scenes, and the way the vengeance and Jacques 3 feed off her desire to exterminate the Evermont line.
In 1775, Mr. Lorry meets a woman named Lucy to take her to see her father, who has been released from prison. The novel jumps to 1780, where Charles Darnay is tried for treason. Lucy and Lorry are witnesses for the prosecution, and when the defense attorney points out the strong resemblance between his assistant Sidney Carton and Darnay, the jury acquits Darnay. The racing action takes place on July 14th, 1789. The revolutionaries storm the Bastille fortress. The Farge goes to the cell where Dr. Monet had been held and searches for something. Then, the Marquis Chateau burns down, and the peasants arrest Monsieur Gavel, the tax collector and caretaker. He writes to Darnay asking for help, and Darnay decides to return to France in secret so as not to worry Lucy. The climax occurs when Darnay is arrested in France and imprisoned, and the revolutionaries found out his identity. Lucy and Dr. Manet arrive and visit Mr. Lord. Since Dr. Manet is a martyr for the cause, because of his time in the Bastille, he tries to get Charles out of prison, but he remains there for another year. He is acquitted, but he is rearrested before he can go back to England. In the following action, Miss Pross and Jerry Cruncher encounter Miss Pross' brother Solomon, who now goes by John Vassar. Sidney Carton blackmails Vassar to see Charles in prison because he knows Roger Clyde is still alive and that Vassar is spying for the revolutionaries and the English. Charles is sentenced to death. His father and uncle rape Madame de Foch's sister and kill her brother. Dr. Manet was asked to help save Madame de Foch's sister, So he writes a letter about the Marquis' crime to the Minister of State. He is imprisoned after, and Maran Defoe tries to kill Lucy and her daughter, but is shot by Miss Pross. Right before Charles' execution, Carton drags him and switches places, sacrificing his own life instead, finding in that way a sense of purpose.
One day of 1775, Mr. Lorry received an important message from Jerry Cruncher.
What could this letter be about? A recall to life. Could it be that Dr. Manette is still alive? I must tell Lucy. I must go back to England. Lucy, I need to tell you something.
But what happened?
First of all, calm down. Your father, he's alive.
My father?
He didn't die. He's in France, in a wine shop.
That's impossible. My father cannot be alive. He died. I cannot believe that my father is alive.
Lucy!
When I was recovered from my shock, Mr. Lorry and I went to Saint Antoine in Paris. We entered into a wine shop, which owners were Monsieur and Madame Defarge. When Monsieur Defarge recognized that we were there, he took us to see my father. Father, are you my father?
Who are you? Are you my wife?
No, Father, I'm your little daughter. Can you recognize me, please?
Lucy?
Yeah, Father, I'm Lucy.
Lucy.
Thanks, Father. Thanks, God. Father, I will take you with me to England right now. Okay? After 2 years, my father was completely recovered from his past, at least physically. The next tremendous experience I had to witness was to see my dear Charles Darnay at the court. He was accused to be a spy.
I, John Varset, testify that I saw Charles Darnay handing some papers to Frenchmen. He is a spy from France.
Stryver, the lawyer of Charles, put into doubt the testimony of the witness, showing that physical resemblance between Sidney Carton and Charles was almost the same. Thus, that physical resemblance, the testimony of the witness was rejected, and the jury returned with a verdict: Darnay is innocent.
Thanks, Sidney Carton. Your participation in the trial was decisive. However, I do not see so much the resemblance. But still, I owe you my freedom. Yeah, that was nothing, man. You gained more than your freedom. You gained Lucy's compassion. I'm not particularly fond of you, Charles. You have to know that. I had my suspicion already. However, I thank you again. Have a good evening, Sidney Carton.
Sometime after I was set free, I went to visit my uncle in France. My uncle is the Marquis Saint Evremont. I told him I was renouncing to all ties to his family and to France. My uncle, though polite, showed his dislike for me, and so I disliked him. What intrigues me the most about this visit is his question. He asked me about my relationship with Doctor and Lucy Manette, and he laughed. However, I will never get to know what he meant, because he has been killed. He was stabbed when he was sleeping. A year has passed after the assassination of my uncle, and my fortune has been quite different. I have been a tutor of the French language and literature here in England, and I have been deeply in love with Lucy Manette. Although I did not know Lucy's feelings for sure, I decided to tell her father about mine. I told him I wanted to marry Lucy if she and he would allow me to do so. The doctor agreed, and then I wanted to tell him about an important matter. The matter being the truth about my identity. But the doctor requested that I say nothing until the day of my wedding with Lucy.
Oh, hi, Cindy Garden. I'm so happy that you are here with me.
I'm happy too.
Can you help me with my baby?
Of course I can.
Okay. I will give you some tea.
Thank you. I love tea.
Okay. Here you have.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Lizzie, there's something I have to tell you.
What is happening?
I have been in love with you all this time. You were my last hope to become a better man.
But you can still be a better man without me.
I know myself. There's no chance I can redeem myself. But I just want you to know that I love you and that I will freely give my life for you or for anyone you love. Now, I must go. Take this beautiful angel with you and remember my words.
Bye, take care.
On the morning of my wedding with Lucy, I told Dr. Manette the truth. He was a bit astonished, but he handled it very well. That was the happiest day of my life. 8 years have passed. It is 1789 now. Lucy and I have had two children. We had a son who unfortunately died, and we had a daughter whose name is Lucy. Time has been peaceful in England, whereas there has been turmoil in France. The Bastille was attacked, and the governor was killed. 3 years have passed, and the French Revolution has succeeded in removing the aristocracy and the royalty from the power. France, however, is still unsettled, and I am extremely concerned, for I have received a letter from my friend Gabel. He has been imprisoned for acting in my name. I have to save him. I am no longer an aristocrat, and I have disapproved the actions of my family, so I hope they will listen to me. I will go to France tomorrow.
I, Dr. Manette, received a letter that says, "The revolutionaries had taken Darnay to prison.
I, Dr. Manet, as a former inmate of the Bastille, I had some influence with the revolutionaries. So I decided to leave and try to save Darnay's life. When I returned from prison, I told Mr. Lorry how to try to save Darnay's life. As a Bastille survivor, I was confident and I said myself, I will do something for setting free my son-in-law. But despite all my effort, that was impossible because Darnay remained in prison for 1 year and 3 months. At the trial, Darnay prepared a well-planned defense of himself. However, was useless because the jury remained unconvinced of his innocence until Mr. Lorry and I testified on his behalf. At the beginning, I remember that the court were asking for Darnay's head, but at the end they voted to set him free, even though that freedom would last hours because Darnay was taken prisoner again. At a new trial, I came back to try to save Darnay's life again, but it was impossible. I couldn't do anything because I wrote a paper in which I denounced the family of Rebremont, and I didn't know that he was part of that family. Mr. Farge had that paper. When I wasn't at the trial, Mr. Farge showed me that paper. So finally, I couldn't do anything to save Darnay's life. In December 1757, I was asked to take care of a woman and her brother. But all of a sudden, the woman died and the brother died as well. So I was asked by the two brothers every month to remain silent about the case. But I decided not to do it like this. So I went to the court, I wrote a letter, and I made the announcement. When those two brothers discovered that I delivered a letter to the court, I was jailed after that. But at the end, I wrote another letter to denounce the two brothers. And in that letter, I wrote that these two brothers have to pay for that. And in this case, at a trial, that letter was read by the jury, and the jury sentenced Darnay's life to death. So that's why I couldn't do anything because Darnay was from that family every month. So that's why Darnay was put to death the following day. At the moment to be killed, Sidney Carter entered the room. He explained to Charles Dickens that he would put his life in order to save him. At the beginning, Charles Dickens didn't want to do that, but then he was convinced. And while Charles Dickens was writing a letter, Sidney Carter dragged him until he lost consciousness. Then they exchanged the clothes, and the two guards thought that they were the same person. They thought that Darnay was Sidney and Sidney was Darnay. Finally, Charlie Darnay got out of the jail, and at 2 o'clock, Sidney Carton was put to death.
It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known.